Hi everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's episode, the larch forest gets a little bit of work. It's the second weekend in November, and the larch trees in my backyard have reached their peak and then some. As you can see with the larch Old Growth Forest, we've lost most of our leaves on the collected trees that I collected up in the bogs of northern Minnesota a few years back. The back tree is the one tree here with the needle still on it. That's one of the trees that I got from the nursery when I found a good batch of nursery larch on sale. This one's thick, robust. The trunk isn't quite as gnarly and old looking as the other trees, but those were collected up in the bogs, and so they had a lot more stress and the elements up there in northern Minnesota to look older now. And this tree right here, one of the biggest ones from the bogs, as a reminder, you can always check the playlist for the larch trees in my collection, the bog forest in general. But when you get a tree out of the bogs in northern Minnesota, and it's about an inch thick, they have done studies and cut open trees and counted rings and done all that to research. You have an inch thick tree, you could have a tree anywhere from 10 to 30 years old. And so I'm always feeling fairly confident that this real nice, thick, robust tree here is pushing that 30-year mark. So that's kind of exciting. Has a bit of an odd chop job here from nature. This was not me, this was nature. It's got a little bit of healing coming on that now, growing over parts of it. But kind of an odd looking tree. But in a forest, you know, we're not going to have a lot of these curvy, undulating, big like trees you would have as a solo tree. But some undulation is kind of nice. And it just shows that it's a real tree. It's more realistic. It's got some funky growth onto it. And my goal here is to have an old growth forest, So let's look at a few pictures right now. I've had a few pictures, of course, from my trip to the redwood forests, and those are ancient forests, and they have great big canopies, and they have no branches on the lower parts of the trees. That's one of the common themes, of course, with an old growth forest, is the branches don't start till way up that primary branch. So I can do that today in some of my trimming if I decide to this fall. The other part of the old growth in Minnesota, when you see trees that just pop out of the canopy of a forest, you know that particular tree has survived hundreds of years likely of ups and downs in the elements. When I drive up to the cabin, I drive anywhere in northern Minnesota, and southern for that matter, when you have big trees that just peek out over everything else. And you also might notice a theme on a lot of those older trees. They have more of a rounder canopy. They've survived, they got big old branches up on top, probably not a whole lot down below the canopy. And they just have a little bit different growth pattern. So my trees are not going to be terribly conical shaped for this forest in the long term. My smaller tree on the upper right for you is a very conical shaped tree, as is these back here. This one, I don't know if we're going to survive one more winter. This one's been battered and bruised with a few storms, and it's clinging on though. It's clinging on to life. I hope we have this just really funky tree in the background that continues to stay alive. And we got this one's conical, and this one's kind of conical. This one's conical back here, but we're going to change that today. And then we have these two up front that have that. These are going to be the big mother tree, right? The mother tree, the big father tree, the grandfather tree that's big, sticking up from the canopy. Now, it would be ideal to have this tree back just a little bit, so it's in the middle of the canopy, sticking way up. So in future iterations of this, when I repot it, I may sift things around a little bit and move this one back. Now, I was going to work inside the PSGF today. The Passive Solar Green Frame is doing wonderful things on this beautiful sunny fall day. I'm videotaping in the shade because as I brought my tree inside, it was a little bit too bright, and this is such a big forest. That space in there is, I could have worked on the tree, but it was a little bit too much of the light issue. You have all the shadows and the light sections, and so it's just harder to get a good image for everybody to see. So I brought myself back into the yard where the shade is to work on this forest today. Now these trees, of course, are in full bloom, as I said, or full color, I should say. I took a few snapshots earlier before I started filming today of the trees in my collection. I've got the larch tree that's in the Sarah Rayner pot that I put in that pot this year, has its full color. I have the pot that's in front of the PSGF, the wooden crate that has my thickest of my solo trees. That one's in full color. And of course, early, before I moved all the big larch forest trees over to this current location, I got a shot of the trees over there with all my seedlings, my couple 2-year-old saplings, I should say. They're all in full color, as well, of course, as the larch forest. And lo and behold, after I took this big heavy monster and put it in its place, I noticed when I looked at the bench when I took it away, there was a little nest there from some friendly critter. So here's a shot of what I discovered underneath the larch forest. Yeah, that was kind of fun. Nothing was in there. Looked like a nice, comfy, cozy place. I'm sure all last winter something was keeping nice and toasty. So as I mentioned moments ago, some of the trees will be conical shaped. Those are the younger trees. I anticipate adding another 5-6 trees in here this next spring. So I'm going to take my 2-year-old saplings and I'm going to put them and display them as well. And again, I might even put a couple in front of this tree so it kind of blocks the trunk a little bit, but shows this big tree coming out of the forest. And if I'm able to, I will move this back next spring. But because these have been transplanted from the bogs only about 2-3 years ago when I got them, I want to make sure they have a good root foundation before I mess with them. So I think I'll just add little trees around them in the spring. But in the meantime, we can do our fall work now and make this look a little bit more like, hopefully, an old growth forest, although it kind of does already based on the pictures I was showing you. But we're going to bring a few things up. And I think the first thing I want to do is actually work on this back tree and bring this tree up a little bit. In the back corner of the larch forest, I have this great big full tree that's been doing wonderful things. Now this one again was from the nursery, so it doesn't have as much character. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to see if I can get some of these needles off of here so I can see it a little bit better. They're not quite ready to just fall off. A lot of times when you shake a tree, you get some leaves to fall off, some foliage to fall off. There we go. So this should be an old growth forest as well. Maybe not quite as big as the main two, but it should be a little bit more old growth. And so we're going to make, and because it's thicker than the other trees, I want to make sure it's going to be old growth. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one right off. And then I think I'm going to make this one into a gin, perhaps. It just stumps in there. And this one too could become a gin. There we go. So we got this one back here that could become a gin as well. Like this was death. And again, this is, you know, scale-wise going to be way up the tree if this was an old growth forest. Because as those redwoods are, you go in there and we're about this tall and there's no branches for, and some of the trees until you get past 50, 60 feet. I've got a double branch in the back here that's just clogging things up, and I'm just going to get rid of that. This is kind of a bar branch to the one behind it, and I don't want to block this side with a branch into our face. So as I would do with a solo tree, I'm taking some of those branches off. This one's growing up. This one's a great big branch from here. It's kind of a nice cathedral branch, like what you would see on an old growth forest. I'm going to cut it shorter and just leave it alone for the moment. You'll notice that in a lot of the old growth forests, those cathedral trees where they just have a lot of trees. It's almost like they have trees that are branches that are so big growing out and up, they look like miniature trees, but they're actually huge. Okay. So I'm not going to touch the top too much other than to trim these guys right here. Again, this is going to be more of an old growth tree compared to the younger ones right here. And I think this one I'm going to take off this guy right here and make this the new leader, but there's a branch right there, so let's go ahead and make this the new leader right there. While I'm working on the trees right here, there we go. Okay, so this kind of cathedral look, this could become a cathedral branch. This has got branches here that are sticking up, blocking our view a little bit, in our way. This is the new leader of this particular tree back here. So right now it's still a little bit conical, but as we shorten that up and get some growth in here, I think I'm going to take this branch right off here because it's going to compete with this one and this one. So I got a branch back here, this one right here, and then the main one right here. So this right here could grow, this back here could grow, this. So we could have a big round tree in the future, and we might even have to cut this tree right here in another year or so and let these be the top of the tree. And again, more rounded and less conical shaped. Back here, I can just go ahead and trim off some of this back here. Okay, let me take a look at it with you all. Yeah, so we've thinned it out just a little bit. You can't see it as much because of the tree in front of it. We've got a little bit of heaviness on this side, which is fine. It goes towards the open part of this forest, so it kind of makes sense right now, right? We have a big gap in the forest right over on this side, and so it makes sense that the leaves are growing more that way. And this might be, if I had more forest on this display, this would be crowding up the tree on this side, but it's growing on that side more. We have a really thick branch in here. We can just cut back a little bit. There's a branch that's coming off this primary branch that's just a little too long. That one's a little bit thick. Okay. So we just cleaned that up a little bit. We can actually see the trunk of the tree a little bit more because I cut this guy off right here. I cut a little skinny one off here, and one up here I think I cut off to make a little bit more. We can see that tree all the way up through these trees in the front. Got the super skinny one out here that's very conical and tall. So we're going to leave that alone right there. We're going to call that one. We've taken care of this tree for now. We thinned it out just a little bit, and we're going to let that one grow next year, shortening up some of these branches, and we'll kind of see where we're at next year. Branches that are going more straight up, we got rid of some of those. We've got a nice tree back. It's a really nice solo tree all by itself. It's kind of developing into a nice tree. Could be a tree that I keep out of the forest someday. We'll see. This little one in the back, just cut off these top ones. Again, make it look younger and more conical shape. We're going to go ahead and get rid of this really low branch here, this low branch here, and low branch here. Again, this tree is reaching up for the sun. We don't have as much branching down below. I don't know if I'm going to do a whole lot to this tree. Maybe I can thin the top a little bit, get a little bit of this tree kind of in that conical shape again, because this is one of the younger ones, but it is getting bigger. This one looks like it's been around a little while. All right. So that one's trimmed up, looking pretty nice. So I think these back two here, these two here are just fine. I'm going to leave these two for last. And back here, on the tree that struggled, I don't want to get rid of too many buds. We want as much life on this as possible, as much energy. That one's growing just so weird though. There we go. That's it. I'm just trimmed up a few branches there. Let's go to these now on this right side. Let's take a peek at those. So this one is the front one. It's a smaller one. We do have a more conical shape on this one. I'm going to go ahead and cut it down a little bit shorter. And we're going to let that one sprout out, and we'll see what that does next year. That's all we need to do on that one. This back one, I really like the way it's growing too. It's a little bit more round, like it's an old growth tree though, so we're going to try to make this one a little bit more conical. I think I'll cut this tip off here though, and we'll let these other two take over. Cut that thickness off, cut that thickness off. We don't want the real thick tips. One of the tough things about larches as they get older, you start to get a lot of that swelling up at the top. All that energy in the top of these trees, you know, they all want to be big trees. And if you don't prune some of those tips at the right time, they can become really, really thick. And you don't want that thick tree. So I'm trying to make this a little more conical, leaving these bottom two alone a little bit, coming up here and trimming up these tall ones. We got some that are just too thick. And so we're just doing our best to trim those up. So we just kind of working from the top down, the bottom up sometime here. And getting thinner as we go to the top. Thinner and closer to that trunk. There we go. So there we have a little bit more of a conical shape out here. So we got these two done. This one I touched earlier, and that's good. Now this one's kind of tall. Got some big branches here. We're going to leave these go. This one I think is just too low now for our old growth forest. They all have to grow up tall, skinny to see any light of day. We're going to cut that one down to there and get a new leader up there. So that one's done. I think this side is pretty good. Now let's take a look at our old trees and work on those. We're going to save the big one for last. Let's work on the one on the left right now. So we got all these branches that start from here up. I've got one down here and one in the back here, pretty nice. I'm going to cut that one off here. We've got two of them coming out right at us. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one off. I like these two because this is a cathedral style here, and this is where the tree kind of split. And this one's kind of an old piece of wood. That's old, that'll be old deadwood. We can peel off that bark next year. And then we have, again, a tree that's going to be thick up top, and this is all going to grow, and it's going to get thicker. So we want to be a little careful here. Again, this is going to be a tree that's going to have a little bit more of a flat top. Not conical, but flat top. So I'm just really kind of shortening all the branches. And these all push out a whole bunch of new growth. Now here's a nice example right here. Here's a three-way right here. Comes to the left, goes to the right, and there's the center one there. If I get rid of this thick girth right here, that won't be maybe too much next year. Okay. So it's not overly conical. It is a little bit almost like almost kind of like a lollipop in a way. We can let some of these grow out a little bit longer next season, and we can leave these a little bit shorter up top. We'll just leave it, I think, how it is. I think the only thing I would debate right now is if I chop it one more time up here and let this be the new apex. That also could become a gin. I kind of like that idea. This right here could be deadwood, right here. And we'll let this other part of the tree grow up around it, and this could be just this piece of deadwood here. Let's just see what happens there. I'll get some buds back there probably next year, but let's go ahead and leave that there. This could become the new apex of this tree, and this could be just like it died off, and this grew up instead in its place. So we can do that. Got some other buds back here where I could have some more growth, and it can grow straight up. So we just trimmed it down just a little bit, brought in more. It's still, again, it's pretty much the same all the way around. Almost looks like a chimney cleaner, a chimney sweeper's brush where when you clean out your chimney. It's kind of got that shape right now. So we'll have this maybe die off as deadwood. This could become the new part of the tree. This will grow out here as well, and we'll have that kind of big, round, old growth looking tree. That's the plan anyway. And then we'll have some more trees again. We'll try to plant a couple of small trees around this tree here, maybe one over here, a couple back over here. We'll also put some new trees here, so it'll really, really accentuate the old growth trees, which is 1, 2, and maybe this one down the road. This one still looks a little bit over the top conical. It looks like it's too much of like a big Christmas tree. I'm gonna cut this bottom one off. And I'm thinking about ginning a couple of these. I might gin this one. I don't know yet. It's a beautiful branch, that's for darn sure. Beautiful branch all by itself, but this tree doesn't look as old growth with that low foliage over there. So maybe we gin this one right here. And this guy here should come off too. I don't want him either. But I don't want to over gin it. There we go. Yeah, we just raised up that back tree another section, so that's looking a little more old growth. Okay, and then we have our final tree today. This guy right here, my biggest, oldest tree. It's got a real fun, gnarly look to it. Now it's got a real big branch here. We've got a gin this side, and this one's pretty big. And again, if we want most of the growth up here, this is a really big branch, but it's got a fun branch back here. This branch you can't see from that side, but it kind of curves up in the back. I'll see if I get a shot of that before we leave. So just get a couple of these trimmed up a little bit shorter. We'll see what buds next year, how this goes. And then we want to keep this, again, like it's going to come out of the canopy and be super huge. But if this is the top of the canopy in the future, these trees right here, this is the canopy, and this one grows up tall and this one grows up taller, the canopy is going to have to be from here up, the big stuff. So I don't want to get rid of too much. The only thing I don't like, of course, about this is it's really, really straight. But this is a forest. This is not a solo bonsai tree. And it's got this fun, old, peeling bark, and this tree broke off right here, and it's growing right here. I'm going to get rid of this guy right here, though, because then we're going to have some big, old, weird bulge there. This is a nice branch here, but it's challenging with this guy right here. We got some competition. Cut that off for a moment and cut this nub off. Cut this growing straight up. All right. So again, this is going to push out new growth next year. So this one's coming back at me. Get rid of that one. So I can cut all of these down. This one grows back towards the back of the tree. So again, if I don't want this to become a too monstrous tree, let's cut it down another inch right there. Make it a little bit more lollipop-ish here. We still have too much of it all being one size here. And that's where you can manipulate some of these lower branches and make this part be this tree that's growing really fun. Now I've got some really nice branches in here that could become the future leader of this tree if we want to cut it down another couple of inches. This right here has a nice split right after it leaves the tree, but it's super this way. But then this part of it goes up, so that could be the new apex of the tree down the road. Okay, so we don't have a tip per se. We have kind of this flat tree, which is what I want. We have this flat section right here. Not a real exact idea of where the apex is going to be. And let's take a look at it with you. Just cut that one off. That looks a little bit too contrived. This one looks too tall. This one back here, we're going to leave that one because it's the weaker one. We cut that one down. So we have varying lengths right here. I like the way it looks right now. None of these trees are the same height. And this one back here just looks a little bit too tall. We'll cut that one off and see if we can get one of these other trees to become the new apex of this tree. This one's the older looking tree with the bark, and it's got that old growth forest with this, but then this one's so thick it kind of takes over a little bit. So I wonder if we can thin this one out back here a little bit more. And we got two branches right here that are right next to each other. I'm just going to cut that off. Thin that tree out a little bit. And again, I think we are probably going to gin this one back here. And we have 2 more branches that are still pretty high, low on the tree. Maybe we want to get it a little bit higher. It's so thick though, all the way up here. It's one of the thickest trees way up here. So this could become the really tall old growth forest with some of these branches right here if we let that go. So we'll let it go for a little bit longer. We'll let it go for the season. It's almost the same height as this one, but it's in the back. It might want to take over someday. We'll see. But let's leave it right there. Well, there we have the old growth forest all trimmed up for fall. So this one I'm going to keep in my garage. I don't want to keep this one into the passive solar green frame yet until I have more of my study, my results of how hot and cold things get. Today it's about 50 degrees right now, and I think in there I've seen temperatures as high as in the mid 60s already where the sun is shining, but then down low it stayed in the mid to upper 50s down by the rocks at the base of the PSGF. So of course where the windows are and the sun is coming in, if you're standing right there, it feels like, 60, even 70, 80 degrees. One of the thermometers said 80 this morning, but it was right in that sunshine, I think, where the sensor is on that. So that's not quite as accurate, but it is getting warm in that PSGF in some of those locations. So the trees will have to stay as low as possible if we do get some of the too high of heat and too much sun in the middle of winter when my trees are all going dormant. So the PSGF is in good shape. This forest is in good shape. The larches have been glorious to look at. Fun time of year, of course. Love fall and the colors on the trees. We're going to get this all tidied up in the garage and we'll call it for another show. So hey, take care of you, take care of your bonsai, and you know what? We're going to catch you very soon on the next one.